The prison stood at the edge of the empire, a place no villager dared to visit. The walls were tall and black, built from stones that seemed to drink the light of the sun. Inside, in the deepest chamber, something far older than the empire itself waited in silence. The creature was chained to the floor with glowing bonds that pulsed like fire. It was a dragon, massive and terrifying, its scales as dark as night and its eyes burning like two stars. 4 years it had been trapped there, and many believed it would die in chains. Yet it still breathed, each exhale shaking the chamber like a slow and heavy drumbeat. Most people feared the place, but one girl did not. She was young, no older than 16, dressed in plain clothes, with a thin scarf wrapped around her head. Every evening when the world turned quiet, she carried a small bowl of soup in her hands and walked toward the forbidden prison. Her steps were soft, almost nervous, but her eyes were filled with something stronger than fear. Nobody knew why she went. Nobody dared to follow her into the dark corridors where the chained beast lived. On this night, the torches on the walls flickered as she entered. The air was cold, yet heavy with the smell of smoke and ash. She held the bowl tightly, careful not to spill, as she made her way down the endless stairs. Her heart beat fast, and her hands trembled, but she kept moving. She reached the gate of the final chamber, a door so large it took 3 guards to open it during the day. Tonight, it stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for her. She slipped inside. There, before her, was the dragon. Its wings were folded, its body chained from neck to tail. The chains glowed with strange symbols, runes that shifted like living things. The dragon raised its head slowly, and the girl froze. Its eyes met hers, and for a moment it felt as if time had stopped. She could not breathe. She could not move. But then she saw something she did not expect. In those burning eyes, she saw not only anger but also hunger and pain. She stepped closer, her legs weak, and set the bowl of soup on the cold floor. The dragon did not move. Its head tilted slightly, watching her with endless silence. She whispered, almost afraid of her own voice, "I brought food." The words echoed through the empty chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a slow and deep breath, the dragon lowered its head until the steam of its breath brushed against her skin. The chains rattled but held strong. The girl pushed the bowl closer, and the dragon sniffed at it. Its nostrils flared, and a low growl rumbled in its chest, shaking the stones around them. She took a step back but did not run. The growl faded, and instead of rage, there was a sound almost like a sigh. The dragon touched the bowl with the tip of its nose. The soup trembled but did not spill. The girl waited, her hands pressed together nervously. She had no idea if the creature would accept the gift or crush her with one strike. But the dragon simply lowered its mouth to the bowl and tasted the soup. It was clumsy, awkward, and strange to see something so powerful do something so small. Yet at that moment, the silence between them changed. The girl felt the air grow warmer. She looked at the chains, and for the first time, she noticed they seemed weaker, their glow dimming slightly. Her heart jumped, but she said nothing. She did not know if it was real or her imagination. The dragon's eyes returned to her again, sharper now, as if it understood something. The girl turned to leave. Her task was done. She had brought food and shown kindness to the creature no one else dared to face. But as she walked away, the dragon's voice, deep and rough, filled the chamber. "Human!" It was only one word, yet it froze her in place. She turned, but the dragon did not speak again. Its head rested back on the floor, and its eyes closed. The girl hurried up the stairs, her mind racing. Nobody must know what happened. Nobody would believe her if she told them. Still, her heart carried the weight of that single word. Why had the dragon spoken to her? What did it mean? She could not answer, but she knew one thing for certain. She would return tomorrow. Outside, the night was cold, and the stars were sharp in the sky. The prison stood silent behind her, but deep within, something had changed. The chains were not as strong as before. And by dawn, the first sign of weakness had already begun to spread through the glowing runes. The girl did not know it yet, But each act of kindness carried her closer to a truth the Empire had feared for centuries. The girl returned the next night, her hands once again holding a small bowl of soup, the steam rising into the cool air as she walked the lonely road toward the black prison. The world around her seemed emptier than usual. The birds were silent, and even the wind felt like it had stopped to listen. She could not forget the single word the dragon had spoken, and it echoed in her mind again and again: human. It was strange, frightening, and yet it pulled her back with a force stronger than fear. She wondered if anyone else had ever heard the beast speak, or if it had chosen her for some reason she could not understand. As she entered the prison, the air grew colder, heavy with the same dark weight that always pressed down inside those walls. Torches flickered, their flames bending as if afraid of the creature chained below. Her footsteps on the stone stairs sounded too loud, and each echo reminded her of the risk she was taking. If the guards ever discovered her secret visits, she would be punished, perhaps even killed. Still, she kept walking, her grip tight on the bowl, her mind repeating that same thought: she must not be afraid. When she reached the chamber, the dragon was waiting. Its head was raised this time, and its eyes opened before she even crossed the threshold. The glowing chains that bound it rattled faintly, like restless serpents, but they did not break. The girl stepped forward, trying to calm her breathing. She placed the bowl on the ground again, close enough that the dragon could reach but far enough that she felt safe. For a long moment, the creature did not move. Then its nostrils flared, catching the scent of the soup, and a low sound rumbled from its throat. It was not anger, but something deeper, a hunger so heavy it made her chest tighten. Slowly, the dragon leaned forward, the chains straining as it lowered its mouth to the bowl. The girl watched as it drank, its massive teeth gleaming in the torchlight. The soup seemed nothing compared to its size, yet the dragon ate with strange patience, as if savoring something more than just food. When it finished, its eyes rose to her again, and she felt the weight of its gaze pierce straight through her. It said nothing this time, only breathing heavily, but the silence between them was louder than words. The girl swallowed hard and whispered, "You were hungry, weren't you?" The dragon's chest rose and fell, and the chains shifted as if answering in its place. She stepped closer, only a little, her fear battling with curiosity. She looked at the glowing runes etched into the chains, their light flickering like dying embers. They seemed weaker again tonight, not as sharp as before. She reached out with trembling fingers and almost touched one, but the heat forced her back. A sharp sting burned her skin, and she gasped, clutching her hand. The dragon's eyes narrowed, and for a second she thought she had angered it. But instead, the creature lowered its head, almost like a bow, and let out a sound she could not understand. A deep vibration, neither growl nor sigh, but something in between. The girl stepped back quickly, her heart racing. She knew this was dangerous. Every visit made the bond between her and the creature stronger, and she could feel it changing something inside her as well. She turned to leave, but before she could step away, the dragon's voice rumbled again. It was low, rough, but clear. "Kindness weakens them." She froze, every part of her body stiff. She turned her head slowly, staring at the beast in shock. "What?" she whispered. The dragon said nothing more, but its eyes glowed brighter, reflecting the torchlight like molten gold. The words burned into her mind. Did her small acts of feeding it truly weaken the chains? Was her kindness undoing the Empire's greatest prison? She wanted to deny it, but the runes flickering on the glowing chains told her it might be true. Fear washed over her in waves, but mixed with it was something else. Pity. She had seen the hunger in its eyes, not just for food but for freedom. And for reasons she could not explain, she felt drawn to continue. The girl hurried up the stairs once again, her hands shaking, her heart louder than her footsteps. She could not tell anyone. No one would believe her, and worse, they would kill her if they knew. Outside, the night was colder than before, and the stars looked sharper in the dark sky. She hugged her arms around herself, whispering, "What am I doing?" She wanted to stop, to stay away, but she knew she would return again. She could not resist the pull of those eyes, the voice that had spoken to her, and the strange truth that her kindness was changing something powerful. In the shadows of the prison, the dragon remained silent, but its mind was awake now. Each visit brought it closer to freedom, and it knew the girl was the key. By dawn, the chains glowed even weaker than before, and the empire above, sleeping peacefully, had no idea that danger was slowly breaking free beneath their feet. The girl returned again the following night, her steps heavier than before, her thoughts running wild as she carried the bowl of soup through the empty fields toward the dark prison. Each time she came, she promised herself it would be the last, yet her heart always betrayed her. The memory of the dragon's voice stayed with her all day, the deep words echoing in her mind, "Kindness weakens them." She did not fully understand, but the image of the glowing chains flickering grew stronger in her thoughts. Tonight she wanted answers, even if fear burned in her chest. The guards were not at the gate, they trusted the prison's runes and believed no living thing could escape. The girl slipped inside unnoticed, her breath trembling as she descended the endless stairway. The torches burned dimmer than before, and she wondered if even the fire was afraid. When she reached the chamber, she found the dragon already awake, its eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. The chains rattled when it lifted its head, but their light was dull, not sharp, like a candle losing its flame. She placed the soup down, her hands shaking, and waited. The dragon leaned forward slowly, sniffing, and began to drink. This time the silence between them felt heavier, as if both of them were waiting for something else to happen. The girl stared at the runes along the chains, and for the first time, she dared to kneel closer. She reached out again, her fingers hovering just above the glowing symbols. When her skin brushed against one, pain shot through her hand like fire. She gasped and pulled back, but not before she saw the truth. The rune had flickered and dimmed where she touched it, as if it had lost strength. The dragon's eyes locked onto hers. It lowered its head, its voice deep and slow, almost like a whisper of thunder. "Do you see now?" The girl's heart pounded. "What are they?" she asked, her voice breaking. The dragon breathed deeply, the sound echoing through the stone chamber. "Chains of living fire. They feed on fear. They bind me with the strength of hatred. But your kindness poisons them." The girl stepped back, her legs weak, as the meaning sank into her. The Empire had trapped the dragon with chains that thrived on cruelty, but her simple acts of feeding, of caring, were undoing what fear had built. It sounded impossible, yet she had seen it with her own eyes. She shook her head in disbelief. If this is true, then why me? Why would my kindness matter? The dragon's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, its voice softened. Because no one else dared. The words struck her harder than the fire of the runes. She looked at the creature, not just as a monster but as something that had suffered for longer than she could imagine. It was strange, terrifying, but also deeply sad. She lowered her gaze, feeling both pity and dread. She wanted to ask more, but the sound of footsteps echoed faintly up the stairway above. The girl froze, her blood turning cold. Someone was coming. She grabbed the empty bowl quickly and pressed herself into the shadows near the wall. The dragon lowered its head, eyes glowing faintly, but it made no sound. A single guard entered the chamber, carrying a torch, his face stern as he glanced around. He walked past the dragon, checking the chains, touching the runes to make sure they still glowed. For a moment, the girl thought she had been discovered. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure the guard would hear it. But the man seemed satisfied and turned back toward the stairs, muttering under his breath. Still bound. Still safe. The girl stayed hidden until the sound of his boots faded. Only then did she move again, her body weak with relief. She turned to the dragon, her eyes wide with fear. "If they find me here," she whispered. The dragon's voice rumbled, calm and steady. "They will not. You walk in shadows, child. But soon the shadows will turn against them." The girl did not know what that meant, but she understood the danger was growing. Every visit brought her closer to being caught, and every kindness brought the dragon closer to freedom. As she climbed the stairs, her mind spun with questions. Was she helping something that deserved freedom, or was she unleashing a force that would destroy them all? The night outside felt darker than usual as she stepped into the cold air. Above her, the stars hid behind clouds, as if even the sky wanted to watch in secret. She hugged herself tightly, walking home in silence, not knowing that the chains deep inside the prison were already weaker than ever before. And in the shadows, the dragon's eyes remained open long after she left, burning with hunger not only for food but for the freedom it could now feel waiting just beyond reach. The girl tried to live her days as if nothing had changed, but the nights pulled her back toward the prison again and again, each time with a bowl of soup hidden under her cloak. She told herself she would stop, that she must stop, yet the memory of the dragon's voice and the sight of the chains flickering weaker haunted her thoughts until she could no longer resist. But she was not the only one who had begun to notice strange things. The guards at the prison whispered among themselves about the runes dimming and the chains rattling louder than before. Some blamed the storm that had recently struck the Empire, while others believed the dragon was growing stronger with time. Only one guard, a man named Roran, was sharp enough to suspect something else. Roran had seen shadows where none should be, heard faint footsteps in the stairway, and once caught the faint smell of soup drifting through the chamber long after the other soldiers had eaten. His suspicion grew day by day, and though he had no proof, his instincts told him that someone was tampering with the dragon's prison. On the fourth night, when the girl once again carried her hidden bowl, Roran chose to linger near the gate. He pretended to be half asleep, his helmet tilted low, but his eyes followed every movement in the darkness. The girl, unaware of his watch, slipped past quietly, her heart racing as always, and disappeared into the black corridors below. Roran waited a few breaths before rising and following at a distance, his steps silent against the stone. In the chamber, the dragon stirred as the girl entered, its eyes lighting up at her arrival. The bowl was placed on the ground, and as the beast lowered its head to drink, Roran crept closer, staying in the shadows near the wall. He could not believe what he was seeing, a human girl, no soldier, no mage, just a simple villager, feeding the most dangerous creature in the Empire. His eyes widened as he noticed the runes flicker each time she drew near, and he felt a chill crawl through his bones. He had found the answer to the mystery, and it was far worse than he imagined. The girl, however, felt nothing but the weight of the dragon's gaze. She whispered softly, asking questions she could barely voice, but the dragon only watched, its great eyes filled with hunger and patience. It knew the guard was there, hiding, but it did not reveal him. It wanted to see what the human child would do under suspicion. The girl gathered her courage and touched one of the glowing chains again, only for her fingers to burn and the rune to flicker weakly. She pulled back in pain, but the dragon rumbled with satisfaction. "Soon," it whispered, its voice so deep the stone itself seemed to tremble. Roran heard every word, and his face hardened. He knew then that this girl was not simply feeding the beast, she was helping it break free. His first thought was to run to the captain, to report her and end the threat before it grew worse. But something stopped him. Watching the girl's trembling hands, hearing the smallness of her voice as she asked the dragon if it still suffered, he felt a strange unease. This was not a traitor filled with hate or greed. This was a child moved by pity, trapped in something larger than she could understand. Still, his duty was clear. He turned and slipped away before she could notice, climbing the stairway with heavy steps, his mind burning with conflict. By the time the girl left that night, the guard had already spoken quietly with another soldier, asking him questions about whether the chains had been weakening recently. The soldier shrugged, saying he had noticed nothing, but Roran's suspicion only deepened. He resolved to watch the girl more closely, certain that she would return again. The girl, unaware of the danger growing around her, walked home under the silent stars, clutching her burned hand and wondering if she was truly doing something good or only leading herself to ruin. In the shadows of the prison, the dragon closed its eyes, its mind sharper than ever. It knew the Empire was beginning to notice, and soon the walls of silence would break. But it was not afraid. It had waited centuries in chains, and now freedom was closer with each heartbeat. By dawn, Roran's thoughts kept him from sleep, torn between duty and curiosity, and the girl's secret was no longer hers alone. The storm arrived without warning, black clouds rolling over the Empire like a tide of smoke, thunder shaking the sky and lightning cutting through the night in blinding flashes. The girl held the bowl of soup tightly under her cloak as rain poured over her, soaking her clothes and chilling her to the bone. Every step toward the prison felt harder than the last, but still she went, driven by something stronger than fear or exhaustion. The wind howled, and the trees bent as if trying to stop her, but she pressed on until the massive walls of the black prison loomed before her, darker than the storm itself. The guards at the gate had abandoned their posts to seek shelter, leaving the entrance unwatched. She slipped inside, her wet footsteps echoing against the stone. The stairway was darker than usual, the torches nearly snuffed out by the damp air, their flames weak and trembling. Each clap of thunder above shook dust from the ceiling, and the girl's heart raced as she descended. When she reached the chamber, she saw the dragon awake, its eyes burning brighter than ever, the chains around it glowing unsteadily. The storm outside seemed to have seeped into the very stones of the prison, and the runes on the chains flickered with each strike of lightning. She placed the bowl down as always, but this time her hands trembled not only with fear but with the weight of what she was seeing. The dragon leaned forward, sniffed the soup, and then looked directly at her instead of eating. Its voice rumbled low, deeper than the thunder above. "The storm weakens them." She glanced at the glowing chains, noticing they pulsed with irregular light, the runes flickering like dying candles. She whispered back, her voice breaking, "How much longer?" The dragon's wings shifted slightly, the chains rattling under the strain. Sparks of light fell like embers where the runes cracked. "One more act of kindness," the dragon said slowly, "and they will shatter." The words froze her in place. She could not breathe, could not think. Her kindness, her small offerings of food, were undoing the Empire's strongest magic. She shook her head, whispering, "No, no, this cannot be true." But the evidence was before her eyes, and the storm outside seemed to answer with another violent crash of thunder. The dragon lowered its head toward her, its hot breath washing over her as it spoke again. "You fear me, yet you return. You doubt me, yet you feed me. Do you not wonder why?" The girl's lips trembled as she whispered, "Because you look hungry. Because you look alone." For the first time, something like silence fell between them that was not heavy with fear but with a strange understanding. Yet the moment did not last. The stairway above echoed with footsteps, many this time, not just one. The girl froze, terror flooding her veins. The guards had returned, perhaps driven by the storm to check the prison, perhaps alerted by Roran's suspicion. She snatched up the empty bowl, but there was no time to escape. The voices grew louder, the sound of metal armor clinking as several soldiers entered the chamber. Their torches cut through the darkness, and their eyes widened when they saw her standing there, a thin, drenched figure beside the chained dragon. One of them shouted, "What are you doing here?" The dragon's eyes glowed fiercely, the chains rattling with a sound like roaring flames. The soldiers stepped back instinctively, raising their spears, uncertain whether to attack the girl or the beast. She shook her head quickly, trying to hide the truth, stammering, I was only lost. I didn't know." But her trembling voice betrayed her fear. Roran was among them, his face grim but his eyes conflicted as he watched her. He did not speak against her, not yet, but the suspicion in the others was growing fast. Another crash of thunder shook the chamber, and the chains sparked, sending a shower of glowing fragments across the floor. The soldiers gasped, and one of them whispered, "The runes! They are breaking!" The girl's heart pounded louder than the storm itself. The dragon lowered its head, its voice filling the chamber in a low growl. "Leave her, or face the storm within." The soldiers froze, fear plain on their faces. It had spoken, clear, undeniable. The Empire's greatest weapon had a voice again, and its warning was not to be ignored. The girl clutched the bowl tighter, her body trembling as she tried to think of what to do. She knew now that everything had changed. The secret was broken, and the Empire would never let this continue. Yet she could not turn back. The storm outside raged on, lightning flashing through cracks in the stone ceiling, illuminating the dragon's chains as they pulsed weaker and weaker. She felt the truth pressing down on her with terrible weight. Whether she wished it or not, freedom was coming. By dawn, the Empire would face something it had tried to bury for centuries, and she was at the center of it all. The storm had passed, But the Empire did not sleep that night. Word spread quickly through the guards who had witnessed the impossible. The chained dragon speaking, the runes flickering, and a girl standing at its side. By dawn, soldiers whispered in fear, priests muttered prayers, and the captains argued in secret chambers. Some demanded the dragon be destroyed at once before the prison failed completely, while others feared such an act would bring disaster on their heads. And at the center of the storm of whispers was the girl, dragged from the prison and locked in a small cell while the Empire decided her fate. She sat shivering, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, her mind spinning with terror. She had only wanted to help, only wanted to ease the hunger of a lonely creature, but now she was branded a traitor, accused of working against her own kind. Outside her cell, soldiers muttered about her punishment, some calling for exile, others for death. But one man stood apart, Roran, the guard who had watched her secretly, the man who knew she was not driven by hate but by pity. His heart burned with conflict, for he had sworn loyalty to the Empire, yet what he had seen in the chamber had shaken him deeply. The dragon's words echoed in his ears, as if carved into stone, "Kindness weakens them." That phrase haunted him, for it was not only magic chains that seemed weaker, but also the Empire's grip on the truth. While the council debated, the girl lay awake, staring through the bars at the torchlit hall. She thought of the dragon still chained in darkness, perhaps starving again without her, perhaps waiting for her return. Fear gripped her heart, but so did guilt. She was the reason the chains weakened, and if the Empire killed her, the beast might never escape. Yet part of her also feared what would happen if it did. In the deepest chamber, the dragon remained silent, its eyes closed, but its thoughts stretched far beyond its prison. It knew the Empire was afraid, and fear made humans reckless. It also knew the girl's fate hung in the balance. She was its only key, the thread that tied freedom to possibility. Without her kindness, the chains would grow strong again, feeding on the cruelty of those who wished her dead. And so the dragon waited, patient as stone, yet ready to strike if the time came. Night fell again, heavy and tense. The council had not decided, but guards were doubled at the prison and whispers filled the barracks. Roran could no longer stay silent. He crept to the girl's cell, his footsteps quiet in the darkness. She looked up, her eyes hollow from fear and exhaustion. He whispered urgently, "Why did you do it? Why feed that thing?" The girl hesitated, then answered with a trembling voice. "Because it looked hungry. Because it looked alone." Roran clenched his fists, torn between anger and understanding. He wanted to call her a fool, but part of him remembered the dragon's eyes, burning not just with rage but with sorrow. He stepped closer. "You don't know what you've done. They will kill you. They will try to kill it. And if the chains break first," he did not finish. Both knew what that meant. The girl's hands tightened on the iron bars. "Then let it be free. If kindness can break what cruelty made, then maybe it deserves freedom." Her words struck him like lightning. He could not answer, for in his heart he knew she was right, yet his loyalty chained him as surely as the runes bound the dragon. Before he could speak again, the sound of armored boots echoed through the hall. Other guards approached, carrying orders. They unlocked her cell and dragged her out, ignoring her struggles. Roran followed silently, his chest tight. They did not take her to the council chamber but down the stairway toward the prison itself. Torches flickered on the walls, casting sharp shadows. The girl's fear grew as she realized their purpose. They were not bringing her to be judged. They were bringing her to be used. At the chamber door, the captain spoke coldly. "If the beast grows strong from her kindness, then let her presence weaken it no more. She will be chained beside it until it devours her, and then we will strike when its hunger is spent." The soldiers nodded grimly, and the girl's heart filled with terror. She screamed and fought, but their grip was too strong. Inside the chamber, the dragon opened its eyes, glowing brighter than fire, as the soldiers forced her toward the glowing chains. The beast growled, the sound shaking the stone walls, but the captain raised his spear, shouting, "Stay down, monster!" Lightning from a far-off storm flashed through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating the moment like a scar of light. The girl cried out as the soldiers pulled her closer to the dragon, and in that instant, the beast's fury exploded. The chains rattled violently, sparks showering the ground, and the runes cracked deeper than ever before. The soldiers froze in fear, and Roran stepped forward, his face pale as he realized the truth. Betrayal had already sealed their fate, for in trying to bind the girl, the Empire had given the dragon the final reason it needed to rise. The chamber shook with the fury of the chained dragon as the soldiers tried to bind the girl beside it, their spears raised and their voices trembling in fear. But the beast roared with such power that dust rained from the ceiling, and the torches flickered as if they would die. The girl screamed as they forced her closer, but her eyes met the dragon's, and in that brief moment she saw not rage but determination, as though it would tear the world apart before allowing her to be harmed. The runes on the chains flared weakly, their light no longer steady but cracked like shattered glass, and with each strike of the dragon's body against them, sparks flew and pieces fell away. The captain shouted orders, demanding his men hold their ground, but their hands shook and their feet slid back in terror. Roran stood among them, his heart torn in two, his oath to the Empire fighting against the truth he had seen in the girl's eyes. When the dragon let out a roar that shook the walls, Roran moved before he could think, pulling the girl away from the soldier's grip and shielding her with his own body. The others shouted in outrage, but in that instant the chains gave way with a sound like thunder, the runes shattering into a storm of burning embers that fell to the floor like dying stars. The dragon rose, its wings spreading wide for the first time in centuries, the sheer force of its power knocking the soldiers back. Its eyes blazed like fire as it looked upon those who had bound it for so long. Many fled, their courage breaking, while others threw their spears in desperation, but the weapons shattered against its scales like twigs against stone. The girl clung to Roran, trembling, but the dragon bent its head low, lowering its massive body until it crouched before her. Its voice filled the chamber, deep and endless, yet no longer rough with pain but smooth with freedom. You gave me food when I was hungry. You gave me kindness when I was forgotten. For this, I will not destroy. The girl's tears fell as she whispered, "Then what will you do?" The dragon turned its gaze toward the ceiling, where cracks had split open to reveal the stormy dawn sky, streaks of gold breaking through the clouds. "I will leave," it rumbled, "for this empire has nothing but chains for me. But for you, you have given me more than freedom. You have given me hope." The soldiers who remained did not dare to move as the dragon spread its wings, each beat stirring a hurricane of dust and wind. With a mighty roar, it launched itself upward, tearing through the broken roof in an explosion of stone and light, and vanished into the stormy sky. The chamber fell silent except for the distant echo of its cry, rolling across the empire like thunder. The girl collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face, her body weak from fear and relief. Roran knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he realized what had just happened. The prison that had stood for centuries was now broken, and the creature it held was gone. By dawn, the news spread across the empire like wildfire. The dragon had escaped, the prison was empty, and no one knew where it had gone. Some cried out in terror, warning that doom would soon fall, while others whispered that perhaps the beast would not return to kill but to judge. The council raged with anger, demanding to know who had caused this, and though many soldiers pointed to the girl, Roran stepped forward and claimed responsibility, declaring that he had seen the truth with his own eyes, that cruelty had bound the dragon but kindness had freed it. The council called him a traitor, but the people who heard his words began to murmur differently. For the first time in living memory, they wondered if the Empire had been wrong. The girl was released quietly, for the Empire feared making her a martyr, yet she could not return to her old life. Wherever she walked, people whispered of the one who had fed the dragon and melted its chains. Some called her foolish, others brave, but none could deny she had changed the fate of the world. And though no one knew where the dragon had flown, the girl sometimes looked to the horizon and thought she saw a shadow passing in the clouds, a reminder that her kindness still lived in the skies. The Empire would never be the same, for the prison was empty, the chains were broken, and the story of the human girl and the dragon had only just begun.